What Happens in the Woods is a true crime podcast. We discuss events that are often violent in nature. Listeners' discretion is advised.
The Civil Rights Movement was a time of great change in the U.S. Riots, killings, marches, demonstrations, police brutality, laws enacted and retracted, desegregation. The list goes on and on. For those fighting for equality, it was the fight of their lives. Too many great leaders, men and women, would pay with their lives. This month is Black History Month, and while 1 month is not enough to celebrate these lives, we wanted to make note of a local leader who contributed so much to his community and worked hard to further the cause of equality during the 1950s and 60s in the Pacific Northwest. This episode, we are honoring a man who was assassinated for his beliefs that all humans deserve to be treated as equals. Edwin T. Pratt was only 38 years old when his life was ended too soon by someone who disagreed with his message of unity and equal rights. He leaves behind a legacy that we here at the podcast and others in this community want to see live long, long into the future for those generations who need to be reminded of what the fight has been and where it continues to go. The reminder is much needed, especially in more recent years. The work is far from over, and there can be no rest until we can all have a seat at the table. What more might this man have accomplished if he had been allowed to continue the fight? This is True Crime Podcast, What Happens in the Woods, with your hosts, Jess and Bryce. Let's get started.
Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode. We are so very glad that you could take some time to spend with us today, wherever you are. Hello, Bryce.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy past Valentine's Day.
Happy past Valentine's Day, yes. When this releases, Valentine's Day would have been Monday.
Yes.
Hopefully everybody celebrated nicely, was loved.
I had a lovely dinner with a lovely woman.
Who is this woman?
You don't know her.
I certainly don't.
She runs a podcast.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I have competition? Is that what you're into?
Sure.
Oh. Okay. What do you have for us today?
I don't have anything. UK is still in the lead. UK is in the lead, sorry. UK is back in the lead.
Yes. Going strong.
Yes.
All right. What else?
You want me to announce something else?
I don't know. Do you want to announce something else? Go ahead. You can. I'll let you do it.
Okay. My lovely wife does not know.
Oh, I don't know what.
No, she doesn't know. I do have an announcement. I have ordered little 2-inch by 2-inch stickers of our logo, What Happens in the Woods, and I just wanted to give them out free to everybody. So anybody on Instagram or any social platforms, get a hold of us. Give me your address. I can send them to you free. I'll even pay for the stamps.
Oh, I didn't know you had done that.
I didn't tell any of you. Didn't tell anyone.
You didn't tell any of you.
Any of you.
Any of yous.
Any of yous.
Oh, why was this a secret?
I don't know.
This is why you have a shopping problem.
I don't have a shopping problem.
Okay, so everybody, Bryce has an online shopping problem. And yes, I am calling him out.
No.
To the world. Yes, daily. Packages show up in the mailbox or on the porch daily. I don't think if there's a day that goes by and we don't get a package or something, it's because it's Sunday.
That's not true because Amazon will deliver on Sunday.
You know what that is?
Yeah,
exactly. And who would know that? Somebody with a shopping addiction.
You would.
I know because I don't think like that. I still remember when we didn't get mail on Saturdays.
Saturdays?
Yeah. You don't remember that?
No.
I remember that as a kid.
I don't.
I'm not older than you.
Maybe I just didn't pay attention. I don't know.
You probably didn't.
Yeah. Anyway, get a hold of us. I'll send them to you.
Okay. Well, that's cool. You could have told me that.
I just did.
You know.
I just told you.
Oh my God,
honey! I ordered a bunch of stickers for the podcast.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm very nervous for WTFs. He's laughing and he's avoiding eye contact.
No, I'm not.
Whatever. You're laughing and looking at the fucking corner right now. I'm very nervous. I almost don't want to do it. I'm so nervous. I'm almost gonna hand it over to Mara or something.
No.
I don't know. I don't know what you have in store for me.
What do you mean? Just another season of WTF Wednesdays.
Okay.
It'll be awesome.
It'll be awesome, sure. Well, yeah. Let us know if you want a sticker.
Yes.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. I wanted to mention that I forgot that it is our podiversary on February 20th.
As well as I did.
I know you did because you didn't mention it to me at all. And I was listening to Crimes and Closets' latest episode, and they're celebrating their 100th episode recently.
Yay.
So congratulations, ladies.
Congratulations.
And then I got to thinking, and they were talking about, how they've been doing it for 2 years almost. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for 2 years almost. It's got to be because we started just a few weeks before, we dropped an episode, I think 2-3 weeks before they did.
Yeah.
And I had to come home and look. I was like, wait a minute. So our first episode dropped February 20th of 2020.
Yeah.
And then on March 6th was the Green River Killer episode, which is still our most downloaded episode. I mean, as it should be, but it still gets downloads.
Yeah.
Is what kind of surprises me a little bit. It surprises me enough to where I'm always shocked when I see that as, if I search for the last 7 days what our downloads were.
Mm-hmm.
The Green River Killer is always second or third on that list.
Yeah.
Is of how many downloads in the last few days. So it's really cool that we're still pulling people in to listen to that episode 2 years later.
Maybe we'll have to do a recap.
Maybe. I mean, sure. I don't know what else there is to discuss.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's not going anywhere.
No.
So I don't know if unless they find any more victims, that would be the only update I can think of. So yeah, we have our podiversary coming up, and this episode is releasing on the 18th. So 2 days from this episode is our podiversary, and I thought we needed to do something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking we could give away some merch.
Yay.
So
who doesn't like merch? Free merch.
Who doesn't want free merch? So we will put some information on that. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do yet, but I mean, it'll be something and it'll be good. So I will put that on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, and the website. Okay. All right. Well, are you ready to get into this episode?
Let's do it.
All right. So this episode, we are sharing a story about civil rights activist and racial equality fighter, Edwin T. Pratt. In the 1960s, the U.S. was a hotbed of social unrest due to racial inequality and the fight for desegregation in schools, not only in schools, but just in general. in towns where things were very, this area is for the white people, this area is for people of color, and don't presume to cross if you didn't belong. What a lot of people want to forget is that this wasn't just a Southern thing. This is a U.S. thing.
Yeah.
And bigotry knows no state lines, and it has lived free and well in many people's convictions throughout this country, including right here in the state of Washington. Edwin Pratt was assassinated just 6 months after Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh.
And I would like to be able to tell you that we know who was responsible for his crime. Unfortunately, Edwin Pratt's murder has never officially been solved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In a way.
Or did they not want to solve it?
No. Honestly, I do think that they tried.
Okay.
In a way, this was a suggestion. So this was a suggestion from Bryce, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew I wanted to highlight something, important for Black History Month, but I hadn't quite decided what yet. I'm kind of curious how you found this. What made you want to discuss this?
I was actually just looking up like tourist sites in Seattle, and this one came up.
The park?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then how it was unsolved, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I was like, how unfortunate. I was like, that's disgustingly sad. Like, he's civil rights leader, only trying to do good, and he gets assassinated, and it's unsolved.
Over
but
50
just like
years.
and all the work he did for the community.
Yeah.
Things like that pissed me off.
Absolutely. Yeah. In my research, I came across quite a few articles, an essay on HistoryLink, and a short interview that Miriam Pratt, Edwin's daughter, gave to NPR, among some other, just news articles.
Mm-hmm.
I also did find some information on how his legacy is still being remembered today, which I will share a little bit later on. So let's talk about Edwin T. Pratt. Edwin was born in Florida in Coconut Grove, just outside of Miami, on December 6, 1930. Coconut Grove was settled by a community of immigrants from the Bahamas in the late 1800s. And there's a lot of information that I'll link some of what I found, but it's really interesting to see that in the late 1800s, these people were able to come to a community, found it, start businesses, be prosperous, and then all of a sudden, white people came in and said, no, you can't have that, and just took it away.
Yeah.
And forced them to, move to certain areas. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting history there. And I just want everybody to know, if any of this makes you think, it makes you wonder about the history of things, please go research it. Please go look up these things. I will link, like I said, the information that I have, and it's not all just specific to Pratt. It's specific to this time, this period of time, when he was assassinated, and not only his legacy, but the legacy of all the people that came before him is very interlinked, and it's not hard information to find. So I was really fascinated by Coconut Grove. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And, now they're in danger of losing that history because the homes that, these immigrants built are being torn down to make way for beach resorts.
Yeah.
Anyways, pre-World War II, the community thrived and was home to many Black families who ran local businesses. After World War II, the gentrification started as those businesses were pushed out and families were forced to relocate. There was also a lot of violence and lynchings during this time of Black veterans who had fought for the country and returned to find the prejudices still very much in play. But of course, violence towards Black people and lynchings were nothing new at this time. Absolutely not. That had been going on for a long time, and there was no stop. I read that a lot of the beach towns in Miami were actually all sundown towns.
Oh.
Yeah. And for those who don't know what that means, basically, if you were any other color but white and you were caught in a town after sunset in the sky, they had this law that you could either be jailed, you could be run out of town, or you could simply be killed for being where you weren't wanted. People also like to forget that we also have a history of sundown towns in Washington State. In the Tri-Cities area, there were sundown towns.
Yeah, I knew about that.
Yeah, I did too. Edwin's parents raised 5 children in Coconut Grove. His father, Josephus, worked in construction, and his mother, Miriam, worked for a hotel as a housekeeper / laundry worker. And from what I understand, his father had also served as a soldier in World War I. Edwin grew up working hard at school, summer jobs. He graduated from George Washington Carver High School in 1949 with honors. Nice. His principal, just side fact, his principal at that time in 1949 was a woman, a black woman, who actually had met and knew George Washington Carver.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So even in his early years, he was surrounded by influential people and, hardworking people that really showed him their struggle, but their perseverance. And it, I think, really formed just that need to see, equality for everybody in him. So after high school, he went to Clark College, which is an all-black college in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
Edwin was very active. School and education were incredibly important to him. And while studying, he was exposed to many prominent members of the black community, very educated, advanced thinking men and women who had come before him and were paving the way for civil rights. He pledged in the first Black Greek fraternity, which is Alpha Phi Alpha. Mm-hmm. That had been started at Cornell College back in 1906. Mm-hmm. It was the very first one that was only for African-American members.
Okay.
He served as student council president from 1951 to 1952. He was involved in the drama club, the men's glee club, and he was voted Prince Charming by his peers. He just had this way about him. He was very charismatic, very charming. In 1950, Edwin and a longtime high school sweetheart had a son that they named Bill. While Edwin and the mother were not in a relationship at the time of his birth, he was very regularly involved in his life. He regularly made it home to Florida to visit. Bill was being raised by his mother and stepfather and had other siblings, but they had a good relationship and he was very involved. After Clark College, Edwin began to work on his master's degree in social work at Atlanta University. This is where he would meet his future wife, Betty, who also was obtaining a master's degree in the same field. So his wife is just as educated.
Yeah.
In different respects, but the same degree. She had a different focus. Very educated and bright young woman. She had gone to Wiley College, which is a black college in her hometown of Marshall, Texas, and she graduated from there in 1951. Betty, as well as Edwin, were some of the first black students to graduate from the new graduate program at Atlanta University for social work. She graduated with a thesis done on, her thesis was, quote, the use of program planning and media in our adolescent group. Betty was very educated, progressive thinking woman for her time, and she was a mentor. Part of her thesis was being a mentor to a group of young ladies who were teenaged, 15, 16 years old. Mm-hmm. Some of the topics that they discussed were like social growth, sex, even types of birth control available at that time. Mm-hmm. And it was open discussions where they could ask her questions, and she responded as truthfully as she could.
That's good.
Yeah. Edwin's thesis was based on discriminatory justice in the courts, which I'm sure he saw a lot of in Florida and Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And in the police departments, he focused on the black police precinct and courthouse that was staffed and run by Black members. So Black employees, the judge, police officers, anybody that worked in the court or the precinct were all African American. There were a few who weren't, but it was primarily staffed and run by, these people in their own community. In his study, he noted how smoothly the proceedings were, how, quote, many of the defendants seemed at ease and there was no apparent fear. Before his thesis and degree were finalized, Edwin took a job with the Urban League of Kansas City in Missouri in 1955. And I have to admit, I was not that familiar with what the Urban League does.
Yeah.
I've heard about it and, just generally knew that it existed to aid people in communities. I assumed with like jobs and housing, but I really couldn't have told you more.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Urban League and what it does. It is specifically in the U.S. From the wiki page, quote, the National Urban League provides direct services in the areas of education, healthcare, housing, jobs, and justice. It was founded in New York City in 1910, and this group has been at the forefront of bringing the issues of African Americans in the areas of like legislature, economic impact, social justice, all of these things to a national platform. They have had the ear, a lot of their advisors, a lot of their high members have been very educated African Americans who had the ear of numerous presidents.
Yeah.
Since 1910, and some of these people have even been on committees to help put some of these reforms, from like ending the segregation, things like that. They were influential on that. So this specific group, the Urban League, it's across the U.S. and it's done so much, not only on the state level, but on the federal level as well.
Good.
Yeah. So the offices in Kansas City where Edwin worked were expanding, and they were leading the way on a lot of hot topics of the day. And after 2 years of getting his feet wet there, he was ready for a huge change and accepted a position in Seattle, Washington's Urban League office. But before that, he and Betty had a celebration to attend to. So after 2 years of being separated, she was in Chicago while he was in Kansas City. Edwin and Betty were married on July 27th, 1956 in Marshall, Texas with her family. The couple spent their honeymoon in Coconut Grove, Florida, spending time with his son and with his family before they moved to Seattle as a newly married couple. And their new roles in their work for the community began in 1956. So Edwin served as community relations secretary in his new position, and Betty was hired by a community nonprofit called Neighborhood House, which served to help European immigrants, specifically Jewish immigrants from Greece and Turkey. So Neighborhood House would help them find housing and help them with job skills and readiness for a job after basically a mass exodus of Jewish people who had come from after World War II.
Yeah.
They had no place to go. Europe was being rebuilt. A lot of their homes were no longer there. These entire families were coming. They were so displaced.
I'm sure the memory there too was a little harsh.
Yeah, I can't. I think that would be very, very bittersweet to know that you can't go home again, that there's nothing there left for you, and that the memories that you have are very tainted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she was in just as much of a prominent position as he was, doing the same type of work. She was, helping European immigrants as where he was looking at helping African Americans in the community. In 1959, the couple moved into Shoreline, which is a suburb north of Seattle. It was a very risky move for them to make because at the time, there was only one other Black family living in Shoreline. There were actually restrictions in subdivisions that stated people of color could not own, lease, rent, or convey land in certain areas.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They were, however, allowed to be on the premises in the capacity of a house servant. The man responsible for these covenants on the land was William E. Boeing, as in the Boeing Company. Yeah, racist motherfucker. The fact, and there's something that I'll link to. If you read through the whole thing, you will see a little snippet of these basically covenants of like an HOA, basically. And it sure is listed there right before you get to farm animals. No people of color. And it's disgusting to read. It's absolutely disgusting. So they were able to move to the area. They found, land that was not part of these land covenants. And they did move. It was, I don't know how scared I would feel surrounded by people that you know are probably not your friends and don't wish you well. Yeah. And you, every day of your life, are reminded of, how people portray you and look at you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I very brave of them, I think, to do that, and not knowing how that would turn out, Yeah. So Edwin would eventually take over as executive director of the Seattle Urban League in 1961. And during his time as the director, he worked on bringing awareness to the discrimination in the Pacific Northwest, people of color were facing, because when they came here, there wasn't a huge population of African Americans, but it was growing because people were leaving the South trying to find someplace better. Right.
See, and that was the thing, like this whole covenants thing. I expect that in Florida. I expect that in the South, but Washington isn't even the South. Oh my God.
No.
I don't want to get into it. Washington is not even the South.
Right.
But they still had those things here.
Yes.
But you want to tell me that racism isn't a United States thing?
No, it absolutely is. And it doesn't matter what state you're in. Some states were maybe just a little bit better at it than others.
Better covering it up, whatever. It pisses me off. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I don't agree with any of it, and
it's weird. It weirds me out because Washington State is the furthest away from the South, yet
right.
Those ideas
were still here because here's the thing:
sundown towns.
Get
the fuck out of here.
You get those ideas from people, and you learn those ideas.
Yeah.
We are not programmed to naturally hate other people.
No.
We learn that as it is taught to us.
Yep.
Children are innocent. They don't see those things.
No.
But they see what their parents do or their family members do or their neighbors do. They see those things, and that's how they start learning that.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. We could get into it all day long, but to say that is a Southern thing, it is not.
That's a very ignorant thing to say.
It is. You can't assume that it's going to just stop at a state line. It doesn't happen that way. Is it more prominent in certain areas? Absolutely. Yeah. Because where did slavery end and if you want to say it ended, but where did it begin? Where did it get its roots? Not on the West Coast, because we weren't here yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, are there long-standing thoughts and beliefs in other areas of the country? Yes, because they've been around longer. They've been populated longer. Does that mean that it didn't spread? Absolutely not. Absolutely fucking not. Yeah. And it's not just a U.S. thing either. Canada has had its own version of this. Other places where white people have come in and taken what they wanted and done what they wanted.
Yeah.
It has happened. It has absolutely happened. And it's not just a South thing at all. It's not. And this is why a lot of people, I highly encourage people to research these things, because you think here on the West Coast we're more progressive, we're a little bit, more free thinking. We have different ideals, and we're not so. Yeah, but it hasn't always been that way.
No.
And it may not always stay that way. That's the problem. Things change.
Yeah.
But let me get back to Edwin.
Sorry.
No.
Didn't mean to sidetrack
No,
it.
it's okay, because that's the thing. This is a hot topic now. Today, this is a hot topic. It doesn't go away. Race and, injustice are hot topics. So Edwin was instrumental in the Urban League being able to grow so much during his time as the director. There were some laws that, were put in place that were supposedly going to prevent, discrimination from happening in the workplace. And, Jim Crow laws were being abolished, and, things were on paper being changed. But we all know that enacting a law and enforcing a law are two very different things. And if somebody doesn't want to enforce the law, then the law doesn't change.
No.
So people like Edwin were very, very much needed at this time, because it wasn't good enough to say, well, we signed the law. What else do you want? We want you to actually put it in place. We want to be shown that our lives matter. We want to know that we have the right to a good paying job, that we're not going to get discriminated against, that we have access to health care, that we have, access to good housing, fair housing, that our children can go to school and not, be given subpar equipment or schools or 20, 30-year out-of-date school books. Our children deserve that. And that's exactly why people like Edwin were needed during this time. And he really packed a lot into his short life. So he founded and or advised on many committees in Seattle, one being the Central Area Civil Rights Committee and another being the Central Area Motivation Program. Benjamin E. Weeks, the president of the Urban League in 1967 and 68, stated in an interview, quote, Ed was a catalyst. He helped others get programs started, and once they got going, he would serve only in an advisory role. Another quote by a friend of Edwin said that he had the ability to, quote, give people direction, to move people who didn't know where they should move. From what I can tell, Edwin's stance on how to work towards an integrated and socially justified system was through his faith as a Christian and the preachings in the Bible that stated every person was a child of God and deserving of equality. In line with Martin Luther King Jr. and the National Urban League statements, violence was not the answer. Responding to violence only begets more violence, and neither side would win. But death threats and violence continued heavily in the Southeast and other parts of the U.S. against African Americans. And I won't go into details, but there are many things that are available to study if anybody is interested to learn just what the hell was going on in places like Birmingham and Montgomery, Alabama, and Jackson, Mississippi. There were those in the Black community who were just plain fed up and thought violence and force were exactly what was needed. And the Black Panthers were formed in growing numbers as a way to challenge police brutality in Oakland, California. Malcolm X, who was a prominent civil rights activist during this time, he did not agree with Martin Luther King.
No.
And he's quite controversial. All of them are to some point, but he was also a very prominent man who a lot of people listened to. A lot of people, he had people's ears. And, agree or disagree with his beliefs and thoughts, but he kind of directly attacked people like Martin Luther King as being stooges, for the white establishment, quote unquote. He felt that members of the Black community should be able to protect themselves whenever and however they felt. And I think after so much, you can only take so much. A person can only take so much or see so much. And at some point you do get fed up. I think he was at that point and there was no more, let's try to reason this. I think, you know, Martin Luther King was always trying to reason and talk. He just wanted to talk. He wanted to.
Well, he very much, and we all know this. He preached nonviolence,
Right. Yeah.
As to where, Malcolm X was like,
absolutely
eye
not.
for an eye.
Right. So Edwin
Which
Pratt.
I don't disagree with.
That's the thing is, I don't know who's right or wrong. You know, nonviolence has not stopped anything, but violence has not stopped anything. We're still here in 2022 talking about this.
Yeah.
So who is right? I don't know. So Edwin did follow that, you know, nonviolence. He was not about having people take the law into their own hands.
Yeah.
So in the Pacific Northwest, there were members of the community that agreed with those messages and directly opposed Edwin, you know, when he preached his beliefs. He was receiving angry calls and letters that threatened harm and even death from people on both sides of the fence on the civil rights movement. So there were some people who just felt like he wasn't doing enough for the cause for, you know, African American community. And then there were white people who were like, you need to shut up.
Yeah.
Or we're going to make you shut up. Unfortunately, someone powerful enough to do something about it, you know, was threatened by his message and work and decided to take matters into their own hands. So on the night of January 26, 1969, Edwin was shot in the head while standing in the front doorway of his home. He died instantly. And I will tell you more about what occurred in the search that ensued to find the person or people responsible for his death after this break. On January 26, 1969, a snow day had been declared in the greater Seattle area. Everything was kind of at a standstill.
A snow day?
Yeah.
I don't know why they keep saying it never snows here.
It snows. It's just, you know, it's like 1 week or 2 weeks of snow and then that's it.
Yeah, but
yeah.
We're so far north.
Well, yeah, but in other places in Washington, it'll snow more. But Seattle's right on the ocean. I wouldn't expect it to really snow that much.
I do. It's just how close we are. North. Like how north we are.
Yeah. I don't know. So everything was at a standstill. Pratt had canceled plans to be out that day due to the snow and the roads, and it was, you know, really unusual for him to be home. The family had spent the day playing in the snow and having a great time, and Miriam, who had just turned 5 years old, was the delight of her father and mother, and I'm sure that, you know, this was time spent together that day that would turn out to be very bittersweet for her. She was very young. So I'm not sure how much, you know, your mind does weird things, and to have something so traumatic happen, she may not remember that day at all, or she may remember it, you know, clear and crisp, like it just happened.
Yeah.
Whoever did this crime was watching and waiting, and this storm that kept Edwin Pratt home that day was the perfect opportunity for them. So at around 9 p.m., when Betty was putting Miriam to bed, Edwin heard what sounded like snowballs hitting the side of his house outside. And he, you know, after a couple of times, he went up and got up to the front door, looked outside, and was barely able to make out that there were people under his carport. And he asked, "Who's there?" A shot rang out, and Betty unfortunately saw everything from the bedroom window, that there were people crouched by the 2 cars they owned. And she saw the shotgun flash from the muzzle, and she screamed, "They've got a rifle," but it was too late. One single shot from the shotgun was fired, and it connected with Edwin's mouth and passed to the back of his neck. And the 12-gauge bullet lodged in, severing his spine. And he was gone before his body dropped. It was instant.
Yeah.
And all it took was one shot. Witnesses described seeing 2 young men about 6 foot tall. Some said they looked like teens or young men running off and getting into a car driven by a third person, which was thought to be a 2-tone 1968 Buick Skylark. No one got a license plate number. It's dark. It's, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was no good description of the men either. No way of knowing if the men were white or black or what they look like at all. Mm-hmm. The single bullet tracks from the car and footprints in the snow were the only bits of evidence that investigators had to go on. The King County sheriffs conducted a lot of interviews of witnesses and potential suspects over months after Edwin Pratt's murder, and they really got nothing. A $10,000 reward was offered, hoping that, money would entice someone to come forward. It did not. After 10 years, they stopped offering that reward. The FBI became involved just days afterwards, after this happened. And it seemed, they were ineffective because they were not working with the local authorities. It seemed like they were trying to keep this quiet.
Yeah.
Almost. They were actively trying to make it out to be something other than, racially or politically motivated.
Yeah.
So at one point, there was a telefax that went out from Attorney General John Mitchell asking if the Bureau had, quote, any information to the contrary of this being an assassination due to Edwin's civil rights work, and, quote, if so, is there any way it might be publicized through local police or otherwise? Without asking, without coming out and saying, hey, we want you guys to say that this wasn't, he wasn't assassinated because he was black or because he was a civil rights leader, that this is just a freak accident. So, basically I'm telling you what I want you to say.
Yeah.
Essentially, they didn't want it to have any civil unrest because, like I had mentioned, Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated just 6 months.
6 months
prior to this. And that was, you talk about news that's heard around the world, that definitely was on the same level as when Kennedy was assassinated. He was such a prominent figure and such a leader of anyone who championed for civil rights change. And the fact that, he was gone, there was a lot of unrest and unease in the world from that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they were trying to avoid that in Washington. However, it is what it is. You may have avoided it on a national level, but people here in Washington knew.
Yeah.
People locally knew. The local sheriffs basically answered them back with a big fat nope to that question. The spokesman for the sheriff added, quote, I can see no motivation for the killing other than politics or race.
Yeah.
So good luck in that. On January 30th, 1969, Edwin T. Pratt was laid to rest. His memorial was held at St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral with over 2,000 attendees. The day was declared a public day of mourning over the community's loss of such an important leader. President Nixon dubbed Edwin the MLK of the Pacific Northwest. Not that I take his opinion to matter much.
Yeah.
Tricky dick.
Yeah.
But, for a president to come out and acknowledge that on that level was, it means something. It does mean something. Coming from the official office, not necessarily from him in general. He also personally wrote a condolence letter to Betty Pratt, so it wasn't typed up by his assistant. He actually wrote it.
Good.
Yeah. For decades after Edwin's murder, the case remained unsolved. As I mentioned, records were sealed in hopes that if some information was withheld, any leads investigators received would be easily proven or disproven. So in 1994, a freelance journalist, David Newman, was interested in, researching this a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And he started looking into the death of Edwin Pratt and sought to get more answers. During his research, it was made known that the crime scene was not handled properly. And I don't know that it was because they didn't care or because they didn't have the knowledge to do it. But also, snow was melting. You can't preserve snow.
No.
Not very well. So unfortunately, there were a lot of people that were coming and going around the home and
just destroying evidence.
Yeah, destroying
the crime scene. Yeah.
What little evidence they may have been able to get, they couldn't get. So he requested that the official files be released, and he was able to get partial, information from the files, with some documents being turned over to him. He in turn filed a lawsuit saying, I asked for all of them. Why can't I have them? And it seemed like that was going to go his way. The judge agreed to turn them over fully after they had been looked through. So he wanted, somebody to really scrutinize these records, see if the police had a valid reason for sealing them and not making them available. And, if so, then it would stay as it was. If not, then all of the records could be turned over to him. But King County appealed before he ever got the records, and the judgment was overruled. So they remained sealed. So while this case is officially unsolved, authorities believe that they have possibly been able to gather enough evidence through witness testimony to identify who the persons responsible were.
Really?
Yeah. So police made a statement in 1970 that mentioned a possible suspect in Edwin Pratt's murder. Unfortunately, that suspect himself was murdered in May of 1969. It was also mentioned Edwin Pratt's murder could have been a hired hit. The man investigators thought was responsible for pulling the trigger of the shotgun was then 21-year-old Tommy Kirk. So Kirk was a drug user, a drug dealer. He had actually been murdered by a man named Texas Barton Gray, who was a longtime friend. He claimed it was done in self-defense because Kirk attacked him over a disagreement. Gray gave information to investigators that Kirk was the one who had pulled the trigger. And it turns out that really, he was mentioned many more times by other people. It wasn't just this one time. He was high on the possible suspect list. Mm-hmm. And like I said, he is only a possible suspect. They never got to talk to him because he was murdered just a few months after. Turns out that Gray was also thought to be connected to the murder of Edwin Pratt as the man who had been with Kirk under the carport. Of course, he did not admit to any of that when he was questioned.
Yeah, of course not.
Right. There were only rumors, no hard evidence that the two men were accomplices in the crime. A former convict came forward with information that 3 men, so Kirk, Gray, and an unnamed man who drove the getaway car, were hired to kill Edwin as a contract kill. Of course, like I said, he never admitted to that scenario, and he died in 1991 without ever doing so. So that's 2 men dead. No one has been publicly named as the getaway driver. So unknown man and 2 dead and gone who cannot be questioned.
Yeah.
So Tommy Kirk's name came up repeatedly over the years as the most likely suspect. So they are pretty firm that he was their guy that pulled the trigger. Again, no real evidence, but it is unfortunately as solved as it's ever going to be without a full confession or absolute hard evidence.
Yeah.
All they can do is reasonably suspect who was involved at this point, especially so many years later. It's over 50 years.
Yeah.
So the legacy that Edwin Pratt left behind is still strong in the Seattle community. And there are a lot of things in place because of him. Especially, the work that he did with the Urban League and how he worked with city officials to get laws passed, get legislature passed. The goals from the Urban League were coming in across the country to offices that they had in different cities and states. And it was all really work that was done specifically to, on a national level, bring awareness to things and help people.
Yeah.
But in Seattle, he really fine-pointed and fine-tuned where there was areas to address and what he could do and who he could talk to make it happen. And in those short years that he was, with the Urban League here, he changed so much for the community that is still lasting today. He really had a huge legacy impact. And it's a shame because I would have liked to have seen what else he could have done.
Oh, yeah.
For the community. and what else he would have gone on to do on a national level of just this hard work that he did. Yeah, it's really a shame. So here in Seattle, we have the Pratt Fine Arts Center, which offers a variety of classes both in person and online now for things such as metalsmithing, jewelry making, drawing, painting, woodcut, like printmaking, glass blowing, just arts in general. And it is still going strong. This was founded as a nonprofit in 1976, and they still offer things in the community, even like after school programs, summer programs, things like that for community members. They held a virtual telethon in 2021 to help raise funding for the continuation of their scholarships that they give to people in the community who can't afford to take the classes, but, might be interested in painting or jewelry making, things like that. So they were able to surpass their goal in 2021. That was April. So it's definitely going to be on my radar to keep an eye out if they do that again this year, because I would like to contribute. One of my prime sources of information was an essay written by a former employee of the Pratt Center who felt compelled to learn more about the man whose name was, above the door to the building. Yeah. There's kind of like a wall memorial in there. And she said she passed it every day. And she, it drew her. She wanted to know more about him. And she really wanted to dig into his history and where he came from and what helped formed him into the man that he was, the leader that he was, what was going on where he lived, but what was going on in the rest of the world, who were the people he came in contact with.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good essay. I will link it because it is just a very well-rounded bit of information and bits of look at, bits and pieces of a look at what was happening in the nation as well as what was happening in his life. But, that all just happened because she worked at that building and she walked past his, like a plaque on the wall.
Yeah.
And just for whatever reason felt just really needed to know more about him.
Scratch that itch.
Yeah. I definitely recommend her essay. Surrounding the Fine Arts Center is Pratt Park in Seattle. And it's fairly large, I think. I don't know that we've ever passed it. But I was looking it up on the, Google Maps, and I was looking at different photos of it. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty cool looking park. So this is another place where there is a memorial stone and a plaque that are located there to commemorate Edwin Pratt and his legacy. And it is this plaque that led one young lady to become passionate about keeping Edwin's legacy even more known in the community. So after playing a soccer game in the park, she noticed that the stone plaque outside of the restroom area it had, just basic information like the year that he was born and the year that he died and his name. And I think there's just a little bit else on there. And this little girl who was 10 years old at the time was incredibly overcome. She was sad because he had lived such a short life.
Yeah.
He was only 38 when he died. And she kept thinking, this is horrible. That's such a short life. That's horrible. And so she also at 10 years old, not knowing who Edwin Pratt was, went to the library, researched him, got information about him, and made it her goal to put his name out there even more. She's 10 years old.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. So she was just so everywhere about it too. She went, door to door. She went.
Wow.
Yeah.
At 10?
Yeah. She was going door to door. This was just a couple of years ago too. Trying to, her goal was because she recognized that he was so, and education was so important to him.
Yeah.
She knew that there was a preschool that was opening. So Sarah Haycox took the time to begin fundraising and petitioning this campaign to have this new early learning center that was being built in Shoreline named after him. She knew that education was important to him.
Yeah.
And that was part of his legacy. And she did all that she could. So she raised money to have family members of Edwin Pratt flown in for the dedication of this in 2019. She went to board meetings and committee meetings and pleaded her case to have this building named in his honor and won them over. And they were able to raise enough money. You know, she would stand outside of the library with a table and just some information about Edwin Pratt just to put his information out in the community again. It's just amazing what the right nurturing for a child will do.
Yeah.
You know, and the change that could happen. So the Early Learning Center in Shoreline that was opened in 2019 is named after Edwin Pratt. She continues to do what she can to keep his memory out there. This was in 2019, so she is 13 now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is really important. So Sarah Haycox, wherever you are, I would hope you're not listening to this because we're kind of above
But if you
your
are,
age. At some point, maybe you'll get word that, you know, we mentioned you. I commend you for your work. You did something amazing.
yeah, your dedication, your perseverance.
Yeah. And keep at it. Keep doing it. It's not a whole lot of people, even, you know, adults will do that kind of stuff. So you are definitely a special girl. So I think everyone who's listening will be familiar, at least I hope that you are, with civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. and his assassination. If you're from outside of the U.S., you may not. He was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. There are other prominent members of the African American community who were murdered in the 1960s for speaking out against racial injustice. I mentioned Malcolm X. Medgar Evers was also a very well-known leader in the South. And of course, Edwin Pratt was included in that. None of these men that I just mentioned made it to their 40th birthdays. None of them. Each had been working for this cause for around 10 years or longer when they were murdered. And all of them were assassinated. It's not okay.
No.
So Miriam Pratt would grow up without both of her parents, but she has such a strong legacy to look back on. After Edwin's murder, Betty left Seattle for good. She couldn't be here. And she didn't really ever talk about Edwin. Miriam had to learn a lot about her father from newspaper clippings and other people's accounts. Mm. So Miriam also lost her mother just 9 years later. She would be parentless by the age of 14.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She and Jean Solis, a neighbor and a friend so Jean lived right next door. Mm-hmm. She was in her 20s, I believe, when she lived next door to them in Shoreline. But she and Jean remained very close despite, distances and time. They actually gave an interview to NPR in March of 2019, which was the 50-year anniversary for the assassination. Mm-hmm. So during an interview on NPR, Jean commented, he was somebody who was quiet, but had all the power in the room. Is a very strong statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
So yeah, that is the legacy of Edwin Pratt.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah. Guess we're gonna have to go visit now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely encourage people to, support the Fine Arts Center if you can, or I don't know if the Urban League, there are urban leagues everywhere. I don't know if they take donations. I'm sure they do. But these are community-based organizations that deserve help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of education that could come from this. A lot of learning about something that is uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Most definitely.
Yeah. But you shouldn't let that stop you.
No.
Yeah. And it's a good, I think, it's a shame that we're never going to know. Nobody's going to know what happened. The people that have known are probably dead and gone.
Yeah, the story, I have mixed emotions about that because the way they announced it when what is his name? Tommy Kirk died in 69, but in 70 they came out and were like, do we think this is him? It's like, shit. To me, it just seems too convenient. And I'm trying not to be a conspiracy theorist, but to me, it just seems too convenient. Yeah, the guy died. He can't testify. He's not going to say yes or no, but
maybe. I mean, it was just a couple of months after the assassination that he was murdered too. So they may not have gotten that information yet because it took years to even get where they got.
Yeah.
They really may not have had it. But they also had other leads too. I mean, they had people calling in and saying, "Oh, it was this guy," and they had to follow those leads too. I think they did want to find out what happened. I actually respect how the King County sheriffs handled a very difficult situation.
Yeah,
they didn't, they didn't shy away necessarily from trying to figure this out. And even, city officials were really wanting this to be figured out too, it sounded like. So and yes, that is, coming from a lens of over 50 years, I'm seeing news articles and things like that, so many years removed from the fact, but I do have to give them some credit for not dismissing this. For the one sheriff to even come out, he was, a representative of a spokesperson. He was like, I don't see any other thing other than political or race motivation here.
Oh, yeah.
Even after the FBI was like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, this is not racially motivated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for him to come out and make that statement that could have been, job suicide right there, really.
Yeah, I was going to say it could have been, political suicide.
Yeah. So I can't say that they didn't do what they could have done. Mm-hmm. But I also can't say that everybody working on that team was so gung-ho either. Yeah. There are people with varied opinions about political things everywhere, and they have, numerous various jobs. Easily could have been people who didn't want to work this case.
Yeah.
On, the sheriffs or any authorities, really. So it is unfortunate that it's not solved, But I don't want to dwell on that because there were so many good things that came, from this man's life.
Yeah, a lot of good things.
Yeah.
In such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Like you've said. It's just, yeah. I hate it, Both MLK and him were snuffed short of the greatness that they could have accomplished. And it's just sad. It's very sad. Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to dwell on it, but I know there's controversy about Martin Luther King and Edwin Pratt had some controversy as well too. There were some claims that he was having an affair with his secretary, and I don't know. I don't know that, and people who know that are either too old to be concerned about it now or are not here anymore. So, everybody has faults, and I don't think that should take away from his message and his legacy. So I didn't mention it.
Yeah.
I just didn't think it was valid to mention it. It's like with Malcolm X. A lot of people he was a convict. Yeah. He was convicted of felony and he served time. But does that diminish that he was able to become a leader and lead a movement?
Yeah.
Whether you agree with it or not.
That was part of his journey.
That was part of his journey. You know, he sometimes you have to hit the fucking bottom of the barrel before you can get up, you know? You got to hit the dirt before you realize that you got shit to change, and you're going to change something. Yeah. You're going to change yourself. You're going to change your environment. You're going to change your community. You're going to whatever. Yeah. Does that mean that he didn't have a message? No. So I think that's just important to remember too, is everybody's got a past. Everybody's got shit that they don't want to talk about or is nobody's business. So that to me is not a valid thing to mention here in respect. So yes, I knew about it. I chose not to talk about it. I chose not to bring it up when telling his story. So yeah. Just my little PSA, I guess.
Sweet.
Anyways. All right, guys. Well, we thank you for joining us. Please make sure to just continue to support Black History Month in any way that you can. It's really important. And until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another, and stay out of the woods.
Stay out of the woods.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
What Happens in the Woods is an independent podcast and is managed and produced by Gospel for the Rebels, LLC. Research and content are presented by host Jessica, with all editing and producing done by your favorite resident techie, Bryce. We believe in transparency and will always list our sources and information in our episode notes. We are always looking for new cases and stories to tell. We welcome your interaction with us on Facebook and Instagram at WHIT Podcast and at Twitter, What Happens in the Woods, INT2. Or if you prefer, our website is whathappensinthewoods.com. The campfire is open to all. Thank you for your continued support of our podcast. If you love us and want to continue to hear us bring you episodes, please share and like us wherever you can. But the best way to help us grow is to hit all 5 stars and review us on whatever platform you get your podcast fix. Until we meet again, campers, stay safe and stay out of the damn woods.